All right, well, thanks, Glenn, and thanks to the Mines and Wines Committee for the opportunity to talk to you today about what we're doing in Inflection in the northern part of the Junee-Narromine belt. For some reason, it's only my name that appears in the program and etc., which is definitely a mistake. I'm really the bit player here. I'd like to draw your attention to all the names there who have actually done all the real work. So Doug Menzies, Alistair Waddell, Carl Swenson, who are in the audience here, as is Josh Phillips, Douglas Haynes, one of our key collaborators, and I'd also like to point out the real significant contributions of some other people, Jess Askew, who's in the audience, Terry Hoschke, who's also here, and Tony Schreck in the early days of our activities here in the Macquarie Arc in the Junee-Narromine belt. So we are a listed company. We're a Canadian listed company, listed on the CSE in Canada, so you do need to be aware of the forward-looking statements, etc. here. So quickly, I'm just going to start with a little bit of a discussion around our strategy, how we got to where we are now and why we're doing what we're doing, and then I'll talk a little bit to what we've actually been doing, starting at the regional scale, working down to our target scale approach, what we're doing at the sort of more local scale, and then finish up with a little bit of a discussion around the future and what we have ahead of us. So I just want to start with this sort of view here, and we've heard a bit about some of these things already this morning in the great early presentations. And we all know that in Tier 1 jurisdictions, if we think of countries like Australia, Canada, etc., then exploration is being increasingly driven undercover. And I've just put up a few selected examples there that all of you will be aware of discoveries in Australia that share the common feature of being discoveries made by pushing the extents of fertile belts, and I want to reinforce this word fertile as we go through. So these are discoveries that have been made by exploring undercover on the fringes or the interpreted extensions of fertile belts. And the distinction I'm drawing there in terms of when we start to look at covered exploration and start to build strategies for covered exploration is the fertility of the belt that you know about. So is your belt where it's exposed fertile? If the answer to that is yes, then chase it for all you're worth under the cover. This is not about going out finding new belts from fancy geophysical interpretation undercover. It's a very tried and true strategy of chasing belts, fertile belts undercover. And I think probably one of the earlier examples of that is in our backyard here, the Cowal discovery. So in the late 70s and early 80s, when the GeoPico team there in Parkes had their success at North Parkes, or Ganumbla as those of us with the amount of grey hair I have prefer to call it, and thanks Greg this morning, that early success at Ganumbla was taken, that knowledge was taken by that team at GeoPico and Parkes further south into what in that time was frontier territory. That was out there, and look what we've just heard about. So this is essentially what we're doing in Inflection Resources, but in a 2020s version of that. I would also make the point that in my view, and I might ruffle some feathers here, but that the Macquarie Arc is Australia's only fertile porphyry belt. Doesn't mean there aren't other porphyry systems elsewhere in Australia, but having spent the last 10 years in Chile and Peru and the 10 years before that in Indonesia, etc., I think we've got to go chasing economic systems, not what was your term, Phil? Starved. Yeah, I don't like that term. So I like the term, I don't like spending money exploring for them. So I think if we're chasing porphyries in Australia, then the Macquarie Arc is where you need to be. And if we want to do it undercover, I think you do it where we're doing it. So if we look at where we are, you can see our current tenement map sitting there, all 100% owned tenements in the northern part of the belt. So of the Junee-Narromine belt. So north of what's been known for a long time as the Narromine complex around Narromine itself, we're pushing that even further north. All of the targets we've generated are on open ground, 100% owned open ground, they were generated and then the tenements were picked up. And we're taking a portfolio approach here. We don't have all of our eggs in one basket. We're attacking this from a portfolio approach, drilling new undrilled targets. All of these are brand new. And I can tell you, our guys are sitting in Vancouver, our Chairman Wendell, right down to our wonderful fieldy out there in TRANGIE Margus, every one of us is excited when one of our holes is about to hit the basement because we don't know what's out there. You know, this is new frontier territory, and we're all explorers. You know, so this is as good as it gets and as much fun as you can have, I reckon. And we're chasing things with real potential. You know, our goal is another Cadia district, another North Parks district, and maybe the variation, the Lake Cowal district. We'd take any of those. But we're drill testing these targets as quickly as we can and as cost effectively as we can with a really drill intensive program, and then we drill early and we walk away if we don't see what we like to see. So this all started in 2017 when at that time it was the Ramado group, who is Douglas Haynes driven. So some of you will know Douglas and know of Douglas's work way back in the Olympic Dam days. Subsequently, you know, in a couple of those I had on that map there, Ernest Henry in the Western Mining days, Cannington in the BHP days, more recently Kamoa Kakula. So Douglas has a history of finding large-scale deposits by taking this theory or this approach in covered regions. So in 2017, Douglas took the public domain pre-competitive data, and I should give a shout out, I forgot to on the first slide. One of the reasons we're here, one of the big reasons we're here is because of this fabulous pre-competitive data we have in Australia. We've raised our money principally in North America, and they're blown away by what we can do here with free data. So it's we're an example of that data actually being now invested in Australia. We're giving people jobs, we're drilling holes on that data, and that should not be forgotten by anyone. So apologies for the ad there, but anyway. So that early interpretation in 2017 by Douglas generated these sorts of interpretations here, pushing the interpreted geology to the north, concentrating on trying to define lithologies, obviously trying to define the extensions of the belts from the mag and the gravity structure, and then concentrating also on areas where he felt there was areas of magnetite construction and destruction, because we know that's the sort of principal geophysical character of the productive districts. Some modelling around the depth of cover, and then that generated a list of initial targets, and some of those targets then we went back and we flew 100 metre space lines, magnetics on those to refine the interpretations. And on the right you can see, you know, why Douglas focused on this area here. We've got all the black dots, the swarm of black dots here are the public domain drill holes, and you can see in our tenement package there's a handful of drill holes down through here, but the vast majority of this enormous tenement package has not got a single drill hole into it. Sorry, did not have. So then, after those initial group of targets were developed and the more closely spaced magnetics was flown, the interpretations were refined, again using that same sort of approach. The standard stuff, you know, magnetic inversion modelling was used to refine the locations of the areas of potential magnetite construction, the potential areas of magnetite destruction, and then initial drill holes targeted on both the magnetic character, and also just trying to give us a coverage in each of those targets that we liked. And that's the style of interpretation that led to the specific targeting there in sort of 2018-19. And now moving to sort of what we're doing after we've developed those targets. There were 23 initial targets developed, and then subsequent additional targets have been developed. So we've a combined portfolio of 31 targets there in that broad tenement package. 18 of those have been drilled to date, and we'll talk about a couple of those here in a minute. And the approach has been to drill mud rotary drilling through the cover, and then short-ish diamond tails on the bottom of that mud rotary hole. And the lengths of those tails varies because of what we're seeing, but typically in the order of 10 to 30 metres, and we've drilled a small number of deeper holes there. Typically we drill two or three holes in each target to get a look, and then if we're seeing interesting things we'll come back and follow those up. We're typically drilling these holes for 20 to 30 grand a pop, so these are kind of like somewhat deep rab holes, and I think I remember John Holliday telling me once that in the Cadia district a Newcrest rab hole was 700 metres long, and we're drilling, these are essentially just fairly deep rab holes, getting the information in the basement sequence and then trying to squeeze the maximum amount of information out of each of those holes. So we have a pretty standard sort of geological and geochemical sort of list of criteria we use for or continue each hole. And our average cover thickness here has been 175 metres across all of the holes we've drilled. So certainly not an impediment to the economic development of one of these things if we found it, and not really a great impediment to the exploration either. And contrary to some of my fears, and certainly some of the things that were expressed to me, I remember in the most recent Mines and Wines at Wagga pre-COVID, a lot of people were saying, you guys are mad, you're going to have all sorts of trouble with that cover, you're not going to get through there, you're going to waste a lot of money. It's just not been the case. We've drilled greater than 90% success rate here into the cover. It's not been a problem at all. And to the extent that you can see there, we're actually now drilling angled holes. So we're drilling angled holes through the cover where we feel we want a bit of cross target sort of coverage as well. So I think that's a success in itself, that committed to drilling with really good drillers and really good people supervising those rigs, we've been able to do this. So just to move into one of our targets, and this is all public domain, we've released all of what we're talking about here if you want to go and have a look at our website. So this is the TRANGIE MYALLMUNDI target area here, with the town of TRANGIE just sitting to the south here. And it was defined initially on the basis of this sort of complex magnetic pattern sitting on the edge of the interpreted arc here, and if you tweak these magnetics, you see that the complex patterns that are characteristic of certainly North Parks, where I cut my teeth, and the Lake Cale and Cadia, etc. So that's where the initial target was developed, and the first pass drilling there has intersected some really encouraging things, and we'll talk about some of that over the next few slides. So we've intersected an intercalated basalt to andesite volcanoclastic and with sequence with coherent intrusions into that. The geochemistry and the petrography suggest that some of those rocks are very similar to the Macquarie Phase 2, the Ganombla volcanic rocks, and they're intruded by an evolved or a complex sort of suite of diorite, monzodiorite, monzogranites. And the petrography of someone else I didn't acknowledge here is Tony Crawford's done quite a bit of petrology for us, so we bring that local expertise as well. And there's certainly indications there of small volume intrusions with the geochemistry and the petrology similar to some of the Macquarie Arc Phase 4 volcanics. And you can see the drill coverage through there in a range of the magnetic character right around the railway line there in Trangie. If you drive that road, you'll see it. And what we've seen in terms of the alteration and suggestions of the development of potential mineral systems, we've seen really quite widespread and strong early potassic alteration. We see, as I said, that diorite to monzogranite intrusive complex that is consistently potassically altered. So that's a critical point in my mind. We see the hematite-stained albite-bearing alteration that's critical, and Anthony mentioned that earlier, that around some of the mineralised districts. We're seeing abundant and widespread sulphide, pyrite dominated with some local chalco, and Anthony mentioned these systems, as we know, are sulphide poor in general, but we've seen enough sulphide around to know that there's something interesting there. And then we've seen local sort of porphyry style veins, EDM veins, A veins, B veins, etc. So we're seeing definitive sort of porphyry style systems, porphyry style signals. Critically, in my mind, what we see is also the veins and the alteration predate the major tectonic fabrics we're seeing here. So these are not late sort of systems that we don't know exactly what event those tectonic fabrics relate to, but we certainly have tectonic fabrics overprinting the main alteration features, which I think is really important. We've got peak copper up to 0.6% there, within a kind of broad area where we have quite a lot of copper in the kind of excess of 400 ppm sort of level. And again, Anthony, thanks for speaking before me, because I'll draw everyone's attention to, I think it was slide 12 in your talk, where you looked at the copper content in the sodic alteration around Ridgeway, and we're talking 30 ppm, 50 ppm, etc. So we're not too perturbed yet. We'd like to see more copper, obviously, but we don't believe the results we're seeing are certainly not outside the realms of what you would expect to see in these districts at the kind of peripheral scale. And we think there's abundant room here left in this Trangie MYALLMUNDI area. And just remembering this is sort of one of our multiple targets that we're talking about. And I've put there a mag image from the North Parks district at the same scale, just to point out what we're dealing with here. So you can see E26 here to 22 27 here, 48 in the middle. We see that sort of scale there, and this is the same scale. So we have drilled quite a few holes here, but we would argue we've still got plenty of room for a Ridgeway or an E26 or an E48 in this target area. And just to look at some of the rocks there, on the left, those three panels look to that intrusive complex that we see there. The top sort of Monza diorite porphyry. These early hornblends are just absolutely shredded with, or filled with shreddy biotite. All of the mafic minerals are potassically altered, and we fractionate down to this Monza granite sort of phase here. These return mid-Ordovician zircons. And on the right here, we see an example of one of the volcanic facies, hyaloclastite sort of facies in a basalt, and then a coherent, probably subvolcanic porphyry intrusion into the volcanic sequence, not unlike the sort of things you'd see around North Parkes. And in terms of the alteration here and mineralisation, the top panel shows a vein of a chalcopyrite dominated vein, which was from that sample that ran the 0.6. And then we see a range of the alteration features that we see throughout this little district here. You know, these albite, sort of hematite stained albite halos and more pervasive sort of versions thereof. Complex kind of overprinting relationships here with biotite and this albite and epidote, overprinting earlier epidote. Yeah, again here, later epidote overprinting albite rich alteration with biotite kind of veinlets, etc. there. So lots of stuff going on. And then local examples of more sort of classic sort of porphyry style veins overprinted here by a later epidote vein. And on the bottom, an example of where we see these early veins being disrupted by those tectonic fabrics. And also where we see a pervasive penetrative cleavage. The alteration predates that cleavage. And so we're seeing lots of things that you'd like to see there, but we want to make sure we extract the maximum amount of information out of every metre we're drilling here. So we've also undertaking sort of what might be considered sort of specialist studies, if you like. We think they're now becoming sort of routine parts of the explorer's toolbox. So we've undertaken a reasonable amount of sort of green rock type work that Josh Phillips, Codes graduate, one of Dave's students, has led for us, and Josh has done an amazing job in helping out, firstly just pulling apart the paragenesis of the green rock environment, the chlorite epidotes, and then analysing those and putting them in the context of all of that work that's been done there principally out of Codes over now 15 or more years. Probably the thing I want to point out here firstly is I think we're moving towards an understanding of the paragenesis of the green rock environment, but I think the thing that stands out for us all is how complex it is. We're seeing multiple overprinting events of these, of the epidote chlorite, overprinting various types of albite bearing alteration, overprinting early potassic alteration, etc. So I think it was Greg that mentioned this morning, and Dave also, good porphyries tend to be multi-phase. Now, we haven't seen lots of multi-phase porphyry veins with chalcopyrite hanging out of them yet, but what we see is multi-phase alteration and veining, and I like when I see these sorts of rocks, so complex rocks. And we've done the sort of suite of green rock type mineral chemistry here. Just one quick example on the bottom there. Our rocks in the coloured circles there, plotted in arsenic antimony space. This is against the North Parkes data here in the grey cloud. So our epidotes are sitting within the place where you'd like to see fertile epidotes if you follow this story. And we've also done a small amount of sulphur isotope work, following on the work that Alan and others did there at Cadia and Paul Hethersay previously at North Parkes, that showed that there's a consistent variation in the sulphur isotopes related to the reduction of a magmatic or an oxidised sulphate bearing fluid to form the pyrite. These are our data here, and you can see a really nice range clustering around about 0 per mil and trending down into values of -5 per mil or thereabouts. So this gives us encouragement that our pyrite is likely to be magmatically derived, so we're not dealing with kind of some other strange pyrite that has no significance from a porphyry perspective, and it also gives us encouragement that we're seeing that, that we're potentially seeing that fractionation, and we can maybe start to use this as a tool. So we don't have enough data yet to see if it's really going to be a fantastic vectoring tool, but I think as a minimum it provides a bit of a screening tool. Do we have magmatically derived sulphide here, and can we start to use that? So that's one of the things that Josh has also been helping out with. So I'll just very quickly touch now on sort of where we're headed. So we've all seen versions of these exploration triangles in the past. So this is our version, and we've kicked out a bunch of targets here where we've drilled. We haven't seen what we like, so moving on. We've drilled a bunch, and then we've got some of those that we think deserve further attention, and then we've got a bunch that we still need to be drilling. And I'll just give you an example of a couple of those. One of those we have here is what we call Duck Creek. It's about 75 k's or thereabouts north of Trangie. We really like the magnetic signature here. So this area here, very complex sort of curvilinear patterns in the magnetics. Sitting here, this is the gravity on the right, so this is the main part of the gravity that marks the arc coming up here, and we've got this pretty prominent gravity low feature sitting in here, which is about the same scale as the gravity low that sits under North Parkes, and we think is a potential analogue for that North Parkes more fractionated intrusion that sits underneath, and we're heading into this area initially here, where we're going to be drilling in and around some of these curvilinear patterns here in the Duck Creek target. Another one is a little further north, Fairholme target. Duck Creek's down here, Fairholme up here, which is a long strike from the Macquarie target, which has definitive altered Ordovician age volcanics, been dated, and we're basically a long strike drilling some sort of complex mag patterns in there as well. And then one more, we're pushing well north, which is even higher, less known, I guess, but well north here, right in the northern extremities of the magnetic complexes, and a lot of this has been driven by the fact that we now know we can drill through the cover sequence cost effectively, and we can push this approach even further north. So we're looking forward to getting into those at some stage down the track as well. So just last slide, we're chasing the giants here. Our goal is to find another Cadia, another North Parkes, and we're genuinely spending good money, but with the right team and the right approach, we think, to making sure we're maximising our probabilities of success. And keep watching the website, and you guys will know very soon after we do if we intersect the big one out there somewhere. So thank you very much.